Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black in. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So I thank those who have hit like and subscribe. I doubly thank those who have hit share. And I triply thank those who have hit all three. But the share button is the one that's the most important. I've given more ear and I'm listening more to those who have decided that they're going to call for a separate community to be formed out of the brown and beige of us and the admixed. I've listened. I'm not calling for a recategorization of black admixed people into a separate category, and I'm not calling against it. I'm going to leave this up to the admixed and unmixed black populations. And as a matter of fact, the black admixed populations have several terms for themselves. I prefer to use the term black admixed because if somebody is merely light-skinned, well, MC Chan sent me a link that showed that gene actually developed outside of Africa and then got introduced in the continent from the outside. So while one could be almost completely black and be light-skinned, it does happen. It is a gene that came from outside, according to the latest research. They have not been able to find evidence of any genes coding for lighter skin starting in Africa. Now, the Eastern Asians and the Europeans have two different genes that code for it, but if they mix, they still produce a very light-skinned person. However, the genes that code for this are different. It's funny. The Japanese has a particular set of genes or alleles that code for his light skin, and they've had it for 12,000 years. And then the Europeans have another gene that codes for theirs. It's funny because theirs is only about 8,000 years old. It was initially thought to be about 6,000 to 7,000 years old. Now it's been found to be about 8. So truth be told, people have been living in Europe for a very long time, and they were black far longer than they were white, even in Europe. That's just a little nugget I thought I'd drop on y'all. So that's why I use the term black admixed for those who may not want. That does justice. Whether you say they're black too, or you say they ain't black, but they have black blood, that does justice. Some people prefer to use the term golden. I don't have anything against that term. Although I know that people in general tend to act more like crap than gold. Doesn't really matter in that regard, but you could say bronze, you could say copper, or sable metals. I use what I use for the reasons you already know. And if you are completely, as far as you know, you are 100% African, no outside blood, then I would say black unmixed. Just to be fair to all. I leave it to the black admixed and black unmixed populations to determine whether or not the black admixed population is going to be considered black or something else. Y'all decide. I've said this before, but I want to point something out about if there will be a separation. And really, when I think about it, these two terms I'm about to tell you also are applicable if there will be no separation. But it's just that if there will be no separation, then they don't have to be thought about as much, I'll say. But if there will be a separation, I want all of you, whether you're black unmixed, black admixed, or you're not really sure because you ain't taking the DNA test. I want all of you to keep two things in mind. Number one, separated or not, all of us should retain the right to claim certain heroes. Malcolm, Muhammad Ali, Coretta Scott King, W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, the reason I say these particular ones is because if there's going to be a separation, then it will become a question. Well, Malcolm was technically one of us because he had a white grandfather on his mother's side. And even his dad was probably not 100% from Africa, so that would actually make him one of us. And I mean, if he was alive today, he'd have been voted off the island like the rest of us. But the thing is that when Malcolm was alive, Malcolm wasn't. When Malcolm was alive, Malcolm was not fighting with. Hold on, y'all. Sorry. All right, sorry about that interruption. So I mentioned them because they would be considered to be black admixed in today's terms, and if we are voted off the island, so to speak, or voted out of the black demographic population of the United States or other countries, then they would have been voted off too if they were alive. And but when they came up under the one drop rule. So we would respect their frame of reference. We should respect their frame of reference. Both of us, united or separate categories, should still take them as heroes, because we need to be honest with ourselves about their frame of reference, which was the one drop rule, even if everyone today decided to do away with it. That's the first term. Second term, and this is important. This again is applicable if we do not become two different categories. But if we become two different categories, this is something that would require more conscious thought, but it's still important. Maintain divisions between and distinctions between us and people whose attitudes towards the most melanated, unmixed of us is negative. Now, some of us would say, well, wait a minute, we breaking away from Blackistan and they never liked us and mistreated us and all that. Why should we care about how the Afro-Latinos feel about the most unmixed of our relatives from whom we come? That's their problem, it ain't ours. We separate now. I get it. Politically and demographically, you may become separate, but genetically, while being distinct, we still would be related. We are related. And so keep in mind, and this is the thing, I'm using Afro-Latino as an example because the youth really are not that bad. They're not that big a problem right now at this point. But let's take a community that's more uniform in their Negrophobia, if you will. Let's take the Pakistanis, because they can be some of the most Negrophobic. Take a look at the Pakistanis. Let's say, and we already know in the States especially, they do not look at black as equal. They don't even look at their darker skinned members of their own as being really as equal as others, even if they love them as relatives. It's funny like that, but it's complex and I don't want to go into all that. We know what our relationships are like and what the reasons are. If you are black admixed, and you're quite, and it's very evident that you are an admixture, don't think that the Pakistanis are going to still treat you as equal to themselves, because they see themselves as being completely devoid of any black African blood. So even if you are very comfortably watered down black to them as far as they're concerned, understand that you're still not considered an equal by them. Keep that in mind. I'm just using them as an example. I'm not telling us, black unmixed or black admixed, to keep and maintain barriers and distances from people who don't have a problem with black blood. I don't say this about how we treat the Cambodians and the Filipinos and the Thais and the Laotians. I don't know how many feel. I don't know what the deal is with the Thais, but we don't have to push them aside or keep a distance and say, hey, I'm going to stay here, but you stay there. We don't have to do that. The Malaysians, Indonesians, they don't look down on black people. And therefore, even when the women bleach, they don't look down on black people. And therefore, we don't have to be that way with them, whether you were black unmixed or black admixed. Doesn't matter. They're not entertaining these biases and these ideas of black being lesser. And so therefore, I don't have to tell either of us this, but I did want to point these two terms out proactively. Because one, they're applicable whether we're going to be two separate categories or one, which again, I stress is your decision. But the other reason also was that in the event of a separate category, now we would have to consciously think more about these things. And I don't want to see any of us of any shade or admixture for that matter, or unmixture, make the mistake of thinking that our relationships with other groups have changed from what they actually were. Now, some of us don't know how certain other groups feel about us. I mean, there are those of us who don't know that the Southeast Tropical Asian is not the enemy, and aren't even smart enough to distinguish between them and the Northeastern non-tropical Asian that looks down on us and looks down on the Southeast Tropical Asian. Some of us are just geographically unaware. We are as geographically ignorant as the average redneck stereotypical American. And that is a doggone shame. But then again, it also comes from not maintaining the proper moral distinction between us and that Western European who's really the main source of this. And frankly, that leads to the third reason for saying this. The third reason is that if I have to separate from a relative of mine that is traumatized by my appearance and phenotype, okay, I gotta separate. You can't stand me, ain't gonna be around me. Okay, fine. I gotta accept that. But if I have to accept this from a relative, and the family decides that they're going to vote me out the family because they just don't feel they can trust me looking at me anymore, and therefore they're not going to allow me to advise any of us against any forms of dysfunction either, okay, then what that means is I'll be damned if I'm going to be voted out of that family, but then turn around and go to the common enemy that traumatized them first. That's not going to happen. That enemy is still the enemy. That's where all this got started. You see, if a friend of yours and you wind up having to split, then you got to split. But you do not go to the common enemy that caused the split and then say, I'm going to link up with you and we cool now, as if he's going to accept you. If he was willing to split your friend and you, he obviously is a common enemy to both of you. Don't forget it. Thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum. And black, heterosexual, admixed or unmixed, non-select male power just because they don't like it. And black patriarchy, admixed or unmixed, until extinction or judgment day.